you made your decision of who you're going to interview. One of the things that Paul mentioned is that you should really think about where you're going to interview the person. Because sometimes, do you really want to do it in your home? Right? Yes, no, depends on your comfort factor. There is a safety issue sometimes too. So there's a lot of questions out there, and this here is just about to give people the option. There are options out there of where you can have an interview.
Yeah, and you need to think about this in advance. Before you start calling people and stuff, and people are hard to get a hold of these days, Fernando, as well. People are busy.
Oh, I know.
Yes, they apply for your job, and yes, you would expect that they would be running to you, right? Yeah. Because they're looking for a job, But the reality is that people are busy, they're looking for other work and stuff. Yep. And if you want to capture them, you actually, when you're ready to do this, you want to do this pretty quick. Yes. Right? Because they're going to get another job if you don't capture them at the right time. So on that phone call, you want to be able to, if you determine through that phone call that you want to interview them, you want to know exactly where you're going to have the interview, and perhaps have some days and times lined up to do that already. Mm-hmm. So your own home, if you're going to do it in your own home, the point here is really important to avoid distractions. Not answering your cell phone, not having people coming and going while you're doing the interview. Really have a clean desk, basically, where you're just communicating with the person, giving them their full attention. Doesn't have to be a long interview, by the way. It just needs to be a interview that's private and be able to communicate openly. Mm-hmm. So the other ideas of a coffee shop can be good. If there's a little bit of a private area in the coffee shop, a quieter area. We're particularly using Waves these days. I'm not trying to promote Waves necessarily, but Waves has been a fantastic one for us because a lot of them actually have a little separate room. Mm-hmm. And that's where we've been able to do a lot of our interviews, mm-hmm. is actually in that room. Libraries is another one. You can find a lot of quiet spaces in a library. It doesn't have to cost you money. But if you want a little room, it doesn't cost you a heck of a lot to rent a room. I think we just did one recently at $14 for an hour kind of thing. So yeah. If you want a few hours of really not being connected to your home or other places and having a friend, this is a good thing to do.
Yeah, and the library one, for example, is you can set up multiple interviews to happen at the same,
absolutely.
Together. So,
and then we don't talk about it very much here, but we actually at Individualized Funding Resource Center, we've developed an application form. Okay. And so we actually have people come to a library and fill out an application form, and then we get a chance to see them briefly, right? Get even a few-minute interaction can tell you thousands of words. More than a piece of paper is going to tell you, right? Yeah. So having come and 10 people fill it out, get a chat with them for a moment, you can really determine quickly who you may be most interested in interviewing. Okay.
So the next, moving on to one more section, it's 2 or 3 o'clock. But we only have a few more slides, so we'll just keep going on it. And the next part is all about the actual interview process. Now you're at the home stretch.
So, absolutely. So, so this is the pre-interview by phone, and here what you're doing is, if there's something major out of the the resume or things you feel you need to ask right now, you can ask it here quickly. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, you're looking for your top 5 questions, right, that you want to ask, right? And a lot of it is around their availability. A lot of it is that specific skill that you want them to have, mm-hmm. and perhaps letting them know one particular personal item that might, if they would want that job or not. Yes. So you don't waste your time, right? No, I do have to say, though, there's a lot of jobs out there these days, and you kind of need to advertise yourself at the same time. So you want to toot your own horn a little bit, mm-hmm. here. And if you're a good employer, you want them to know you're a good employer. So if there is some words of positiveness that I would put here, that is, have a little chat with them and say, let them know how much you appreciate it, that took the time to respond to your ad. Let them know that you're personable, right? And that you're the person. I have to say, most employees are used to having an agency giving them a call, right? Right. So they think you're just an HR person giving them a call, right? So you want to let them know that you're the person that was the direct employer, right? And that you're looking for someone that you can really team up with, right? Mm-hmm. and do things. So,
yeah, definitely. That's a good point to make, because a lot of people, they just miss out on that because they think they're getting a phone call just to schedule a meeting, scheduling an interview.
Exactly.
So being clear about this particular one is
yeah. So I mean, here are some examples. Talking about your personal health stuff. The main personal care tasks that you need done, hours per day, time, shift, salary. If you're on the low end of the salary, you may want to hold off a little bit and promote yourself a little bit more within your within the interview. So then you can teach yourself a little bit, and let them see that it's more than just working for me. You're getting a good experience, maybe. Yeah. But if your salary is able to be very competitive, then throw it out there and tell them your salary right away.
Yes. So then we move on to the actual interview process. Using the phone is, we're slowly going from one step to the other, which the ultimate end is that you have a really good pool of candidates or possible employees to choose from. Yeah. Very, very last step before is for the very last step, which you hire them, is that face-to-face interview. And during that time, when you do the face-to-face interview, Paul mentioned just a few minutes ago, that you really want to have a set a group of questions that you want to ask an individual that are very specific. But also it gives you an opportunity to have a conversation. The interview is about a conversation. And that's where you're going to really gather some information about that person in a lot of different ways, their body language, how they answer, their communication skills, whether they're a good fit. And you're going to get all of that through a conversation. It's not just a Q&A. You're not asking questions and having them answer that question. You want to make this more about the experiences that they've had with other people, experiences that you might possibly have with them. And it all revolves around a conversation. I've gone through quite a few hirings. I've been on both ends of it. And I know that's one of the best ways to go through this last step is make it open, talk, do as much of that as possible, and really get to know the person during that interview, because at the end of it, they've already laid out all of their experiences, their duties, what they've had before, those things. You have access to that already. You can ask them a little bit more about it. Get to know them as an individual, because we talked about this at the very, very beginning. Is that, do they fit? Will they fit with you? So
yeah, Fernando, and I think you hit it right on the head there. That it's that conversation. It's going to be that conversation that and I would say, don't talk too much. Let them talk. Yeah. Right? I think that's a habit I know that I have. Is I start talking too much about the position and everything. You know what? You'll get to that. You'll get to that information, right?
Start talking about botching.
That's right. Botching, how great it is. That's right. But I think it's really important to hear them and hear their experience.
Yes.
Obviously you want to keep the interview in control, but at the same time you need to let it go out of control to see what that person's about.
Yes.
Right? If they want to give you more information than what you're looking for, have a listen for a bit. Determine if it's something you need to hear about. If not, bring them back to the interview question.
Yeah, definitely. Silence can be one of your best helpers here, because sometimes they just keep talking. They just don't say anything, they keep talking, and then you learn more and more and more about that person.
Yeah, and try your very best to get them comfortable at the beginning, though, right? Don't be too, strict in your format at the beginning, right? Mm-hmm. So when you start talking to them, one of the famous questions that we always ask is, tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me what some of your interests are. All of a sudden, now they're getting comfortable to talk about their things that they already know and they can talk about easily, right? Kind of thing. And then you can kind of move them into somewhere else.
Yeah. And that's the second point there is about personal information, right? It's not being specific, it's letting them talk about it. Yeah. Because you're not going to ask every single question.
Yeah, and you can't ask too personal questions anyways, right? Exactly. But they can choose what they're wanting to do in providing you information if they want to provide you their information. Yeah. Then,
so, if I may, we talked quite a bit about the first 2 points. I don't think we really need to go there too much. But what I'd really like Paul to talk about is part of the last 4. These are just included just before we start this session here. So, what are they all about?
So this is what I refer to as kind of the, my test, my little test, and
this is during the interview.
These are set up tests during the interview. And this is kind of try to figure out how well they take initiative and how well we communicate with each other. And so I call the first one, the drop your pen, and you can drop anything you want, right? But the idea here is, what is their reaction to that? Are they quickly running, quickly trying to grab that pen? Do they just ignore the pen? That tells you a lot of information, right? And it depends on your personality about what you want to have happen with that pen, right? Because maybe you don't want someone to just go and do it for you. You might want to ask you first. Do you want me to pick up that pen? Maybe that's what you want to hear. For me personally, I just want them to pick up the pen myself, and I appreciate, and that will score points for me that they picked up the pen without me asking. If I'm interviewing in my home, I like to take them into different rooms and get them to turn on a light. This is my test because I will leave and I won't ask them to turn off the light. But it'll tell me a lot if they don't turn off the light, right? It's going to indicate to me a little bit that they're probably going to not necessarily put things back the way they were, and that's important for somebody with a disability, right? In my situation, I can't put things back, right? But most importantly is that there's another attendant that's coming in the next day. If it's not where it's supposed to be, that's just going to cause lots of trouble. I actually asked them to take something out of my bag, so I make sure that day I don't have any really valuable things in my bag. I want to be clear, don't have valuable things in your bag. But you may want to ask somebody to grab something out of the bag for you in a button, or something. And now you have to take the time to explain to them where it is, and then you're going to find out how well they take direction, right? And do they get frustrated fast? Do they, because they don't know your bag from anything, right? They're not going to know whereabouts we're talking about. But are they going to be patient with you? Or are you going to work with lots of communication will happen with that little interaction. Have something in your way. When I do things at Waves now, I don't necessarily set up the room. Actually, and I used to do that at the beginning. I would set up the room, make sure I'm set up in the right spot. And after fact, now I meet them out. If I'm doing just an interview, I meet them outside, know that there's a chair in the way. I'll go inside and see, first of all, are they rushing to try to move those chairs for me? Or are they going to say, would you like me to move that again? Same concept, right? But there's some little things that you can do to try and kind of figure out that personality. So, and if you will connect or not.
Yeah, definitely. Great points. I had, never really thought about that when we spoke about them just before, and I thought, oh, those are great things to include because it's a different way of interviewing. You're doing different things, revealing the person's personality, revealing, them as an individual, what they will do right away. So there's lots of interesting things that you can do during an interview. The next slide is more about a bunch of points, really, not because
interview questions. Really,
after talking about these ones, these interview questions are a little bit boring. However, they might sound boring. They are important.
They're very
pick and choose the ones that are applicable to you as an individual. And too long though. That's why I was going to say.
Yeah. These are Fernando has a list of interview questions that we use, and what we do is we just pick. So there's these questions here, but there's also a document that we have as well that you can use, and you just copy and paste which ones are suitable for you. 10, 15 questions max, right? Try and keep your interviews to 20 to 30 minutes at the most. If you're hitting it right on with the right person, those interviews might go a little bit longer, and that means that
generally do, yes.
You got someone, right? If they're going on longer. But have your outs, by the way, as well. If an interview is going bad, don't go through all the questions.
Yes.
Don't waste your time.
Don't waste their time either.
Don't waste their time either. If you get to a point of your questions that you determine, what I asked you before, if you have a driver's license, you don't have one, don't carry on the interview unless you have another position.
Yep.
But if driving was a key component for you, stop the interview and say thank you for coming. And that's respectful of both parties.
So the last couple of bits, Sarah, we're just talking about.
Things we can't ask. These are great, important things. And we're going to get into human rights stuff in our next sessions and stuff. But we can't ask an applicant their age. You can't ask about their religion or their faith. You can't ask if they're pregnant or not. Those kinds of questions. And you really can't also, You can say, you know, in an ad that you prefer female workers
Yes.
or male workers,
Yes.
but it cannot be a must, right? You know, and there are some circumstances. Keep it simple, though, right? I mean, if you're not comfortable with a male or female attendant, that's okay as well, right? But you know, you really can't be discriminated based on someone's orientation. Okay.
Yeah, and more information can be found on the Human Rights Tribunal page that's just listed on the bottom there. Tons of information on that website of some of the things that it actually has a lot of different things about the whole hiring process on there also.
Yeah, and like I said, we're going to be actually dealing more in depth around human rights in our next session.
So the last little bit is that, okay, we've got through the interview process, we've made a selection, the job offer is out there, and that last few things that you want to ask the individual to provide. And I had a conversation with Paul. I asked him, you know, should you ask them or should it be mandatory? Like, you're requesting these 5 things or 5 items from the individual as part of their employment with you. And he said, yeah, absolutely, because you just want to make sure you get the right candidate at the very end of the day. And a few of these things are easy to do. Some of them are a little bit more challenging because they actually cost a little bit of money. Also, so I wanted to ask you about the criminal record check. I know now that everyone who works with, it used to be anyone that worked with children was required to have a criminal record check.
Yeah.
They changed that 2 years ago. It's anyone who works with children and vulnerable population and are required to have a criminal record check.
Yeah, and you know what, we're working on this completely right now to try and see if there's a way to, you know, first of all, you can't get away from the fee.
No.
First of all, you cannot. At this point in time, you cannot. If you're a volunteer, there's ways to be able to do that. But in the case of hiring an employee, you have to do the pay. So, but be aware though that, you know, Vancouver Police Department may charge a different price than another department in another area. So get to know, you pick up the phone and call actually. And it's not complicated. They can get the form right at the police station and stuff. They can fill it out, send it in. If you're doing a lot of recruitment and stuff, we're finding out about there's some possibilities of doing it online for people. So get in touch with us. We can help with this as well because we're going to have one that's going to be set up to do it online to be able to help people do it faster. So we can request the information. The reality is that in most cases, the criminal record search, for example, if it's $55 or whatever it is, the employee pays for it first, and most often employers will pay, reimburse it after a 3-month probationary period is completed. Yes. So, you know, the medical record check, same thing. You know, this is where maybe you want a TB test done. You know, we have some samples of those medical records that people could use. Driving record abstract, absolutely. You can request that.
Yes. You don't want to be hiring someone who has
many accidents.
Yeah.
Maybe a lot of speeding tickets.
Exactly. Yeah.
Unless you like them to speed while you're driving.
Yep.
And then having a document for oath of confidentiality. I have all my employees sign one, and we should probably next time we're online, we could probably give an example of that for people to have, because it's important to have people sign confidentiality. What happens in your home should stay in your home.
Exactly. Yeah. So those are some very basic things, and finally, you're at the end, right?
Whoa, everyone, we're getting there. We're getting there.
Yep. So now you put the offer. Someone's come in. They said yes. This is what you need to do at the very end.
So, you know, and this is the employment contract. We've gone through that. You get them to sign it off. Ask them to read that. You want to create a new paper file for your new employee, which should include that employment contract, their TD1 information, The TD1 is the tax form that gives you the permission to actually take taxes off.
Yes.
And everyone has to fill that out. If there's an application form, if there's your resumes, those kinds of things, put it all there. Any kind of other information that you've gathered from the employee, like the criminal records and all that kind of stuff, that was everything all together. So that brings us to that you've hired a successful employee.